Welcome to Book Banter with me, your host, Dianne Burckhardt. I hope you will join me every Wednesday as we explore all things to do with, well, books. Let's get on with our show today. Hello, my happy people, and welcome to Book Banter with Dianne Burckhardt, our 75th episode. Today is July 19th, 2023, and have we got some great things going on with us at Burckhardt Books? I am so tired. You're not going to believe all the stuff that we have got going on. But I'm going to hold all of that information to the end and make sure that you listen all the way to the very end of this episode, because we have got free ebooks. We have got free audiobooks. We have got a new magazine coming up with some fantastic interviews that you will not believe. I have got a buying guide planned for the end of the year and so much more. So be sure to stick around until the very end to get all of these details. But for right now, let's get on with our fantastic interview today with the incredible Natasha Deen. Welcome to the show today. I am so glad to have you with us. Could you please give our audience a little introduction of who you are?
Well, hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining Dianne and I. My name is Natasha Deen, and I am a kids and teen author based in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, and I am absolutely delighted to be here. Super quick about me, I have published over 40 books for kids, teens, and adults. And for kids and teens, I have books that are for at-grade readers, meaning that they're in grade 3 and they read at a grade 3 level. And I also have books for striving readers, meaning they may be in grade 12 and reading at a grade 3 level. My books cross all the genres. When I'm not writing, I teach for the University of Toronto's SCS. I teach Introduction to Children's Writing. And when I'm not doing that, I spend a whole lot of time trying to convince my pets that I am the boss of the house. And to date, I have never once convinced them. So that is me.
I think that would probably be a more daunting
challenge. Well, I think, right? Shakespeare said, "To thine own self be true." And I realized within the context of these pets, my thine self is to be the servant. Just serve, give the cuddles, give the food, give the treats, let them have the bed. Nobody gets hurt. It's all chill, totally fine, right? No complaints.
Now, whenever my dog comes over and like pushes his butt up against my leg and I reach down and just automatically start scratching, my husband just laughs at my dog and me and says, "He has trained you well."
I know. Well, the amount of times, because we have one cat and one dog, and the amount of times that I'm sitting watching TV with my husband, and then all of a sudden I'm like, wait, what's going on? And our cat has like positioned himself beside my lap, and I've been so well trained that I just start rubbing his tummy. Like I'm 5 minutes into this body massage, and all of a sudden my brain is like, wait a second, what is going on here?
It's just habit.
Right? Well, listen, it's good job security, right? And I feel like at the end of year review, it'll do me well with the bonuses. So
now I have to admit, whenever I looked at your website, first of all, I'm very impressed with the layout of your website. It's gorgeous.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. That was me and Beyond Studios. I came to them with the idea of what I wanted, and they were very collaborative, and I'm so pleased with the way it turned out. So thank you.
The image, the house with the bicycle and the street sign and the shoes hanging from the wires. I love
that.
Right?
I love that. Amazing. Every time. Like, this is just great. I love this. This was a good decision.
But besides just the look of your website, I was absolutely amazed at how many books you have in your catalog. It's like, my God, how long have you been writing?
Thank you. So for all the writers who are hopeful writers looking to be published, whether it's independently or traditional, my big tip, because this is what I did, I just came at it from a really business standpoint. So when I got into the industry, I think 2006, 2005, I decided I wanted to do it as more than a hobby. I actually wanted to do it as a job. And so what I did is I kind of looked out at the world, and what I realized was that adult romance was the most open door for new writers. You didn't have to have an agent. You didn't have to have previous publications. And that's where I started. And then in 2012, I started writing in children's and young adults. So the books you see on my website are just books that have been written in the last 12 years. Am I doing the math right? 11 years. So the ones I've done. And it's really interesting because I don't know what the industry tells emerging writers now, but when I was starting out, I was told that, gosh, if you want to be taken seriously in the industry, you need to choose a genre and then you need to build yourself in that genre. And once you build yourself in that genre, then you can go off and write in other things. But I tell you, Dianne and listeners, I don't have that kind of attention span. Like, I want to write the story I want to write.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I did. And long term, like fast forward to today, and I love it because it means that I can go back and forth between whatever genres I want to write, whatever audience I want to write for. And it has never been a negative for me. So I would say to people who are coming into the industry, do what you think is right for you. Do what you think is right for your career, because those things then will fall in place. If you're trying to please people, you're trying to like do what other people are telling you is right, it may not work out the way you want.
Yeah, definitely always be true to yourself, because if you're not happy, why do it?
Yes. And if you're not feeling like your authentic self, especially with writing, because no matter what kind of book you put out, no matter what kind of reception you get, there's always going to be somebody who thinks you should have done it differently, who thinks that, they didn't like this book. And if only you had done this, and if only you had not done this, somehow your book would have been better. And if you are authentic in yourself and you know that you've done your best, you know that this is a work you're proud of, then you can take those opposing opinions in stride. It's if you haven't done something that is authentic to you, I think sometimes then those things can hit and stay deeper than they should.
And I was just noticing you have some books that are standalone, but then you also have several series.
Yes, because that's how my brain works. So some stories I'm like, and we're done. And then other stories, I'm like, oh, there'd be more. So, for example, with YA In the Key of Niragani and The Signs and Wonders of Tuna Rashad, those are standalone books, because once Nira's story was told and once Tuna's story was told, there was really no sequel or other adventures I could see them having. Whereas for something like Spooky Sleuths, which is awesome, and Rakshar, I totally could see it. Because I think too, sometimes like the premise of the story will help us decide if we want it to be a series or not. So with Spooky Sleuth, Awesome has moved to this new town, and there's weird things happening in town. And Awesome is of Caribbean descent, which is me as well. And when you are a Caribbean kid, like you grow up being told that the supernatural exists, and these are just two worlds that live side by side, and you just move in certain ways. And for Awesome, he's looking at all these weird things that are happening. So like in book one, there's this tree that's just growing way too fast, and it looks like a really evil tree. And he's not sure, but he's pretty sure there's like a ghost in this tree. And his friend Rakshar is very open to the possibility that this exists, but also she's very science-based, so she wants proof, is coming at it from a different perspective, because the town that they live in is a science town. It's a research town. So she thinks that maybe what it is that the experiments that the adults are doing, something has gone out of control. And that, in fact, is what they're seeing. So in the first book, they collaborate to find out what the truth is. And I really like that. I love that it was not one person trying to prove they are right over someone else. I love that they were really supportive of each other. And I really like that at the end of the book, there's no answer given. So it's really left up to readers to decide for themselves if they're sort of Team Rakshar, or they're like, no, this is definitely science gone wild. Or if they're with Awesome, they're like, nope, this is definitely something supernatural. And after that book was done, I could just see, because the series is based on Caribbean myth, I mean, there's so many Caribbean myths. So I was like, oh, well, if this works, then, we can introduce way more monsters and possibilities for what things might be, So that's why some are standalone and some are series.
And I actually read Spooky Sleuths #1 today. And I have to tell you, there are so many things about this that I loved. First of all, it's like a very strong female character who has a definite mind of her own, and she is into STEM.
Yes.
It's like that, I
Yes.
think, is so important to be showing that here there is a girl, she's doing scientific method. I mean, because you actually use real scientific
I
method
do.
in this.
Yeah.
And at the
Yeah.
end, you show their journal notes of how they were applying the scientific method.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
you're encouraging all this stuff without shoving it in their face. It's all just part of the story.
Oh my gosh. Yes, because especially when you write for people who are under 18, and especially when you're writing books for people who are under 12, nobody wants to be lectured to, and nobody
Yeah.
wants to get a class lesson that's
Mm-hmm.
thinly disguised as a story. But yeah, that was something that Penguin Random House Young Readers and I really collaborated on. And I loved it. And I have to give a huge shout out to Lissy Marlin, who's the illustrator, because especially in the journal section, like all the little doodles and stuff that she
Mm-hmm.
added in just elevate that story.
Yeah, that was
But
one thing I
yeah,
was going to ask you who the illustrator
yeah,
was, because I love the illustrations.
right. Oh, she's so amazing. Like I just can't say enough good stuff about her artwork.
Did she also do the cover?
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
she's responsible for all four. Like she's the illustrator for all four books. But yeah, like when Penguin Random House Young Readers and I were working on it, this was something we really wanted to showcase, was that STEM can be cool. STEM is really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Girls can absolutely be great at science. And then also Rakshar is there with Awesome. And then she's got her two older brothers. And then Rakshar and Awesome have the friend Max, who also helps out on these adventures. So she's the only girl. And the thing that I really, really enjoyed writing with the story was the fact that nobody ever questions her. Nobody is saying to her, oh, girls can't be good at math or this or that. And she is hands down the most brave out of all of them.
Yeah.
And so they all tend to look to her for not exactly leadership, because they're quite collaborative, but they do tend to look at her when things are going sideways. It's like, okay, Rakshar will know what to do.
Yeah.
You know, she'll step in, she'll tell us, and she's very good at delegating. And I like that as well, right? That she is good at delegating. She is good at saying, okay, you do this and you do this. And they understand that because she is a leader, sort of like, I don't necessarily know if I want to say by birth, but because she's a leader, they're fine having her lead, right? There's no weird gender norm, trope, white misogyny in these books, which I really enjoyed writing, right? So, yeah.
And I was also very impressed that you have a non-binary character.
Yes. The teacher. Yes, Mix Hudson. That was fun. And I love the way that Lissy drew them. I really wanted to make sure that in our everyday life, we see people of varying communities, of varying backgrounds, and all kinds of things. So I really wanted to make sure that these cast of characters supported what we see in real life, and that when people were reading it, that they could see someone who was representative of them in some way. That was important to me, because when I was growing up, I mean, I grew up in Canada in the 80s, and whenever I do school visits, I always joke with the kids that growing up in Calgary in the 80s, the best way that I could describe it was that me and my family were the only chocolate chips in the vanilla cookie. Like there just really were no other people of color. In the schools and stuff, it was like the only other brown person I'd see was my sister. And I was like, okay, well, that's cool. And so it was horrible when it came time to go to the library, because the characters in those books were always white, like always. And the only time you ever saw a kid of color was inevitably it was going to be a slave story.
Yeah.
And then the worst part was the kid never got to save themselves. They were always saved by some other white character who stepped in to like help them out. And it really annoyed me on many levels, but also because like my family comes from indentured servitude and slavery. And so they dug themselves out. Do you know what I mean? Like there's so many people who come from those backgrounds where it was like there was no white savior, you know, and also the idea that our stories are bigger than this, right? So it was really just so important for me to have people be able to read and go, oh yeah, I see myself. I see that, you know, that's cool. I really wanted that. I didn't want to have a kid who was reading a book and being like, Well, I guess I'm adjacent to this character. I can identify with their feelings, but they don't, they don't represent who I am necessarily.
Well, and I actually learned something from that book because I had never seen the prefix MX before.
Yes. And you know what? It's really interesting because I don't know if that's like North American or Canadian. Like I remember checking with my editor and obviously they have checks and balances as well.
Mm-hmm.
And saying like, I think this is what it is. And they were like, yes, that's good. That works. And I was like, okay, good. Cause yeah, I mean, if you're non-binary, then in the moment you have to assign a Mr., Ms., Mrs.,
Mm-hmm.
it's sort of like undone everything that you just said. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
So yeah.
Do you carry this inclusive sort of representation in your other series as well?
Yes. Yeah. So the other series I have for young readers is the Lark and Connor Boss series. And that's straight mystery based. There's no supernatural element. They are just twins during summer vacation solving different mysteries from who stole the diamond earrings to who's destroyed this painting. And through the book, Connor and Lark are biracial. And then the people that surround them also are representative. So we will have characters who are representative of the queer community. We'll have characters who represent different places in the world and different types of being. Because yeah, again, we go back to it, right? That the world is full of different kinds of peoples and different kinds of experiences. And the way I always think about it too is like, if you walk into a garden that is full of roses, red roses, that is beautiful. But walking into a garden that has red roses and white roses and yellow and pink is a much more textured experience. And then walking into a garden that has all kinds of different flowers and different kinds of bushes and trees, like that's a garden,
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's the same thing with our writing, that our stories get to be these like lovely literary gardens where all kinds of things get to grow.
Well, and it's more representative of the world.
Yes. And especially with the pushback that's happening now, when you're talking about things like the rise of hate against Asian communities, the continued violence against people of Muslim or Islamic backgrounds, like all of these things, it's even more important now that if we are supportive of those communities, that we amplify our voices. And we have different ways that we can amplify our voices, right? Like some of us will write nonfiction books that will celebrate diversity in one way, and some of us will write fiction books that celebrate diversity in another way. And that's how things get done. That's how the world progresses.
Personal question for you from my side anyway. Do you
Yeah.
have any Indigenous people in any of your books?
Yes, that is a good question. I think that would have been my adult romance. I had one character. It's funny. I'm glad you asked that because I haven't had a lot of Indigenous characters in my recent stuff. A lot of my stuff tends to be like own voices. So it's representing my culture.
Mm-hmm.
And then part of that too is, there was a whole conversation within the Canadian landscape about giving space for people to tell their own stories. And certainly within the African descent communities and then the Indigenous communities, there was for a while this idea like people keep telling our stories, people keep representing us, and they're representing us wrong.
Yeah.
And I remember being like, okay, I'm going to be quiet and listen and watch and learn, because I think one of the worst than not representing people is to represent them incorrectly or to represent them in a disrespectful way. And I think that can do even more damage, no matter how well-intentioned we may be.
Did you write your romance under Natasha Deen as well, or did you have a different name for that?
Oh, I wrote under a different name. So in the adult romance, it was under Bronwyn Storm.
Nice.
Because yes, because I remember going to these romance writing workshops and stuff, and they would all say the same thing. You have to have like a romantic kind of sounding name, because that's how you're going to draw people in, and I was like, oh, okay, then that's what I'll do. And it worked because I have so many nicknames, but one of my nicknames is Brown. So Bronwyn seemed to be a fairly easy transition to that. And then when I decided to go into middle grade and young adult, I was like, okay, we definitely need to have a different name because you don't want your 12 and 14-year-old readers coming across something that's out of their wheelhouse or not intended for them.
Yeah.
And then I just had so much fun with writing kid lit and teen lit that it's just, at some point in time, I'll probably go back to writing adult romance and adult stories. I mean, certainly I've done short stories for adults and that sort of thing. But I just feel like kids have such a great sense of the ludicrous. That you can just go into so many really interesting places when you're telling stories. And I'm not sure if that's because as like adults, we live so sort of like logically, and we're always trying to like make sense of something. So if I'm telling a story to a kid and I go, oh yeah, well, I was walking down the street and I turned a corner and I fell into this portal and then I ended up in this world where there was like these gummy unicorns. The kid is going to go, oh, okay, great. What happened next?
Yeah.
And if I say that to an adult, they'll be like, well, wait a second. What about the space-time continuum? What about physics? And like, what theory are you using for this portal? And how fast was time traveling? And where were the light waves? And it's just like, cool. That's not part of the story, man. Like that's... Did I not mention the gummy unicorns? Like, was I speaking too quietly there? But for kids, they want plot, they want action, and they want characters. And I think because my brain naturally goes to that, and I'd love to say it's because I've remained a child at heart and not because I'm like the person who refuses to grow up. Yeah, but yeah, that's the reasoning behind the two names.
I read on your website that you didn't always want to be a writer. There was something else you wanted to be.
When I was a kid, I wanted to be a superhero so badly, like so badly. And I think, and it's so funny because I always, when I do those school visits, the kids and I usually have a good laugh at the fact that, when you're growing up, people tell you that you could be anything if you just put your mind to it. I tell them when I was a kid, no matter how hard I tried, I could never fly off the bed and I could never get my eyes to work as lasers. It just never happened. But I think a lot of it too came from the uncomfortableness of not seeing myself in the world and not seeing representation of different people, and one of the superpowers I really wanted was the ability to read minds. Because I thought if I could read minds, then gosh, I'm going to know who the good people are. And I'm going to know who the people I need to stay away from are. Because one of the things we talk about in Canada is our racism is quite polite, and it's very passive. Like you have to be able to decode what people are saying to understand what they're saying. And as a kid, I remember thinking, if I could read minds, then I would know. And then the weird thing is, you grow up and you become a writer. And for any of us that study the craft, we start talking about things like subtext and the gap between what a character is doing action-wise versus, what they're saying, you start seeing how people reveal themselves through their words and through their actions. So in its own weird way, being a writer is a little bit like being a mind reader, or at least being able to navigate what people's true motives might be, which is why I think being creative is so much more than just, I'm just going to write this book. But I think it's got some excellent real life applications. Like when we listen to people and we pay attention, I just think it tells us so much. It just opens the world. It just makes the world so much more vibrant and intricate and interesting and magical.
You write a lot of different kinds of books. You have your Girls Survive series. You have your Spooky Sleuths, your Lark and Connor that are more straight kind of sleuths, your true grime. Which one of these is actually your main passion? Which one do you get the most excited about writing the next book?
Oh, none of them. Or maybe all of them. Yeah, I love that question. I don't have like a favorite. It's just sort of wherever my brain is right now. Like whatever I'm working on currently is my absolute favorite book in the whole entire world. Because for writers, I mean, we all understand this, right? It has to be our most favorite book because this thing is going to take weeks, months, years to be finished. And if it is not our most favorite, we will probably put it down and go off and do something else, right? So that's, to me, it's whatever I'm doing in the moment. But also every series, every book has its own interesting challenge and joy that will suck me in and make me want to be part of it. So with Spooky, the thing that I love is navigating this line that it will never be clear. It will never be explicit about what the answer is, because I really want the reader to decide that for themselves. With Lark and Connor, it's where do I find and hide that clue? You know, where do I bury it that at the end, my readers can go back, and when Lark and Connor solve it, my readers can go back and go, oh yeah, there it is. She played fair, you know, but she also did a great job because I bypassed this whole moment. And with the Girls Survive series, it's researching for history, seeing how nothing changes, which is equally sad and hopeful all at the same time. And the sports stuff is the vicarious thrill of me getting to write and sound sporty when I'm like the least sporty person. The running joke with all my friends is, if you see me running, run too, because something bad is chasing me. You know, or there's an amazing cupcake sale that I just need to get to. Like I walk and I run and I do try to be physical because it's just good for our mental and physical health, especially when we're people that sit at desks for long periods of time.
Yeah.
But there's never a moment where I'm like, I'm so excited to go and do this. It's just like, ugh, is it done yet? I finished. So yeah, I mean, there's always the joys, and then there's always the pain of going into any series or any story, especially when there's series, because you're always trying to keep it interesting and new and engaging, right? You don't ever want it to be like, oh, okay, here we go. You know, I've seen other series where it's like a strong female lead and she falls in love with someone. And you just know, as soon as she falls in love with whoever it is she's falling in love with, you're like, oh, okay, they're the killer, because she's never allowed to be happy in love, right? She's never allowed to win at love. And so, you know, it's kind of like that trope of a war movie. As soon as a guy shows you a picture of his sweetheart back home or tells you his wife is expecting a baby, you know he's the next one killed. I mean, you just know, right? So, I mean, that's a trick when we do series, is keep it interesting and don't make it predictable.
Now, considering how varied the books that you write are, what does your bookshelf look like? What kind of books do you like to read?
I'm a sucker for mysteries, and sort of like not exactly cozy, but not exactly like super dark either. And my bookshelf is digital because I'm on a self-imposed ban that I will not buy any more physical books until and unless I would like donate one that's already there, because I've run out of space. And of course, as we all know, we never want to give up our books.
Yeah.
So right now I'm doing Magpie Murders by Anthony Horowitz. And then the one I just finished was Jonathan Kellerman. And now I'm sorry, I can't remember the title, but he's always a really fun read. And Anne Cleves is really good. So yeah, those are the ones, because they're not in anything that I write. So adult stuff for sure. I love reading for pleasure, but I rarely get a chance to read because I'm either doing research or, and this is like one of the joys of being a published writer, is sometimes you get publishers who want you to read a book, and if you like it, offer a blurb that will go in the book. So I have the joy of reading books before they come out, and then you can never talk about those because they're not out yet. And then also as a critique partner, I have a band of writer siblings, and we read each other's works. And that's always so great. It's so great to be able to watch something that starts out as someone's idea and then watch it grow. I think it's also really encouraging and hopeful for me too, because, you know, when I'm struggling with the writing, it's nice to see that other people are as well. So that's definitely something I would say to any emerging writers: find your siblings, find your writing siblings, find the people who will encourage you and lift you up and like give you all the cheers and the tea and cookies when it gets rough. They're such a help. They're such a help.
I'm actually searching for a new group because I was part of a group that started here in my city in Germany. And whenever COVID hit, it went online and it drew in people from all over the world. And we would do writing sprints together online. And the person who was hosting them fell ill and it just stopped.
No.
So now I don't have any writing group anymore. So I'm trying to find a new one. It does help a lot to have people to bounce ideas off of sometimes. And
Well,
especially when it's people from all of these different cultures, it gave you such interesting perspectives that you would not have just from your own life experience.
yeah, exactly. Like culture is it's so interesting how different communities navigate the world, and things that are considered the bad word in this culture are not at all considered a bad word in this other culture, but also how like varied what we think funny is.
Yeah.
And how some places, like, it's a very dry, almost passive aggressive humor.
Yeah.
And then other places they will absolutely like roast you into oblivion.
Well, it's like people have this perspective that Germans are not funny, that they're always serious. Germans are very funny, but there's a specific kind of humor.
Funny, that's true.
And if you appreciate that kind of humor, they're hilarious.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. And just how people, I was going to say, like, how they can, like, be sassy.
Yeah.
Right? And some people are very polite in their sassiness. And some people are, like, very in your face with their sassiness. And it's so, like, I love humor. I think funny is its own language. And it's so interesting to me when I get to meet people and I get to see what their language of funny is. I tend to shy away from people who are mean humor, right? Because that's not really my jam, especially because when you're roasting each other, there's always a chance that someone is going to take it too far.
Yeah.
And then something that should have been funny ends up being quite hurtful. So I tend to not engage too much with that particular type of humor, or humor that's meant to like make someone feel bad. But other kinds of humor, I'm totally for.
And sometimes it's really hard to translate things because my husband is from Chile and I'm from the United States and we're living here in Germany. And there are some things that he'll like, oh, you got to hear this joke. It's so funny. And he'll translate it for me.
Yes.
But when it translates, I'm like, okay, that's not funny in English. And then he like explains it to me more in like German. And I'm like, oh, okay. Now it's funny.
Now it's funny. Yeah. Yeah, it's true. Yes. And I notice that too with like artists and writers, like the things that we find funny or the things that we share, that to a certain extent, sometimes it's like, I guess you have to be a writer or an artist to find out why that's funny. Like, especially like grammar jokes or jokes about your manuscript not working, or especially like I have a few friends that are actors. And when I watch their TikTok reels or their Instagram posts, and I think it's hilarious because as one artist to another, I can totally identify with it. But I don't know that if you're in business, would you necessarily see the ludicrousness of this thing that they're doing and understand why it's funny?
Yeah.
Maybe, maybe not, right?
That makes sense to me. Now, you have a lot of supernatural elements in your Spooky Sleuth series. Is there a favorite story of the supernatural that you have not put in a book yet that you are dying to use?
Not yet. No, I'm definitely one of those people that I'm going to throw everything I can at the page. Well, because I think sometimes when we're writing, we tend to hold back. We're like, oh, this thing here is really good. I'll save it for like the next book.
Yeah.
And then the current work sort of suffers for it because it needed that extra punch. But I think it also comes from a place of like us feeling insecure that we won't have another amazing 1-2 punch story, line, scene, image. So we're going to always keep this thing in our back pocket, So I learned after a couple of years when I was starting out that actually whatever I wanted to throw in, I should just throw in. It's a little bit like cleaning house, like you create space for other stuff to come in. So no, I mean, I think it'd be really fun to do something like to go deeper into some of the fairy tales and the myths. But I have told those stories. So yeah, that's a good question. I can't think of anything off the top of my head that I haven't tried yet.
I was one of those kids that I was always loving things like untold mysteries whenever I was a kid. I always loved the stories about like chupacabras and, Bigfoot and all of that kind of stuff. So I love all of those kinds of things.
Yeah, the supernatural guys never, like, I loved hearing about them. They never really creeped me out the way that like unsolved mysteries creep me out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I'm far more scared of the random serial killer who they still haven't found,
Yeah.
as opposed to like the mermaid who will sing me to my death. You know,
Yeah.
I feel like I can stand a chance against the mermaid. Like, the serial killer, on the other hand, like that's a little bit more worrisome.
Now, this is the point of the show that I always attempt to do 5 quick questions and they never turn out that way, but we're going to give it a try
Okay.
again.
Okay, for sure.
So,
I'm up for
question
it.
1. What is your favorite adaptation from book to movie?
Book to movie. The Anne Cleave series, the Vera series, or Shetland. That's not a movie, it's a TV show, but I
That
think
works.
it works. Yeah.
Movie or TV show. Number 2, where do you go or what do you do when you need to find inspiration?
Oh, I have an ABC method when it comes to inspiration. So it's the ABC is always be creative. So that at any moment of any day, I'm looking for inspiration. I'm looking for different things in the world. So if I'm on a walk, I'm looking for that interesting, unusual looking tree that could perhaps hide a gnome or a fairy. If I'm out in public, I'm watching the way that people move to see if I can tell the story that their actions are broadcasting. So I don't have a specific place, unless just being awake and alive in the world can be considered a specific place.
We'll take that.
Okay.
Question 3. Since you do like spooky things, what is your favorite spooky place that you have been to?
Okay, this is going to show what a total nerd I am, or what a scaredy cat I am. The scariest place for me, honestly, is like in my bedroom late at night when I've just woken up and the shadows have not resolved themselves and I'm not sure what I'm looking at. That to me is like scary. If I had to pick a physical location, not spooky or scary, but potential for spooky or scary, the Lewis and Clark caves in Montana are amazing. Ooh. Yeah. And they're all underground. You're like spelunking. And it's definitely like the fear of if you ever got caught underground, what would happen?
Question 4. If you could take one of your series and turn it into a TV show for kids, which would be the first one that you would want to do?
Oh, I think Spooky Sleuths would be really fun to do.
Yeah.
And then maybe Lark, and then maybe Guardian. Guardian is a horror mystery fantasy for older readers, but that one would also be fun. But I think Spooky, because I think Spooky gives more places to fall, right?
I think it could just be fun.
Yes,
there's so much more that you could explore with that one, because with it being more of like a supernatural thing, you have so much more opportunity. You don't have as many constraints.
Yes, that's exactly true. And special effects and jump scares.
Yeah.
Right? That would be fun. That would be fun.
So question 5. Do you prefer to have noise when you're writing, or do you have to have quiet?
Interesting. When I'm writing, I have a sound app, like a white noise app. So I listen to a combination of, I think it's like the rain on a tent and a crackling fire, or ocean waves. Yeah. And actually there was like a business reason behind it, because pre-COVID, I was traveling a lot for work and doing school visits and festivals and that kind of thing. So there's a lot of time you spend in airports and there's a lot of time you spend on airplanes. And I realized that I was missing an opportunity because I couldn't center myself to do the writing because there's people around and noise and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So what I started doing was I started listening to airplane noise when I was writing. And it really worked, because then I got to the point that when I got on an airplane, my brain was like, oh, it's time for writing. And then I could actually it just associated that sound with writing. And then the water and all those kinds of stuff too, mostly just to sort of cut down the noise in the airports. So that's what I do. But as an aside, I also have playlists for my characters and my stories, because I feel that also helps me get into the mindset I need when I'm about to write some pages.
I love that you used airplane noise, because basically you Pavloved yourself.
I totally Pavloved myself. That is the benefit of having a degree in psychology. How can I train myself? But it's also the same thing. I have a jar of Hershey Kisses. So on particularly hard writing days, I set my timer for 15 minutes, and then I will give myself a spot of chocolate as a reward for sitting through the 15 minutes of uncomfortableness. So Pavlov knew what he was doing, man.
That's
The
nice.
guy,
See,
right?
for me, it's Fig Newtons because I cannot
Oh,
find Fig Newtons here. So it's a real treat when I can get something close to Fig Newtons. So
nice.
that's my big treat whenever I actually get something accomplished.
Do you ever, like, when you go back to the States, do you ever bulk up,
Oh,
like
yeah.
stock up and then, yeah.
Yeah. Usually,
Yeah.
whenever we go home for a visit, I have a suitcase that I put all my stuff in, and then I put that suitcase in a bigger suitcase.
Yes.
And then when I come home, I have 2 suitcases that are full of stuff.
That's excellent.
Well, you know,
That's good planning.
Yeah. This has been absolutely fabulous. Is there anything that you would like to cover that we haven't touched on?
No, this was a really fun conversation. Thank you so much for inviting me and hosting me, and to the listeners, thank you so much for spending time with us. That was wonderful. Thank you.
And I hope whenever you have something else that you would like to share, you are welcome to come back.
Yes, absolutely.
So there you have the incredible and talented Natasha Deen. If you have somebody who is looking for some great books that are engaging and entertaining for young readers, young adults, or even adults, be sure to go to her website. The link is in the description of the podcast, and check out her work because she is phenomenal. Now, to help celebrate the fact that we talked to Natasha Deen today on our 75th episode, you need to go to Amazon today and for the next 5 days until the 23rd, and you can download my book for free, Into the West, the Orphan Train. The ebook is available for free for the next 5 days to help celebrate our 75th episode. This book is a historical fiction book that is part of a cliffhanger serial called the Into the West Saga serial. I am currently working on the last edits for the last book in that series, number 7, Into the West Family Ties, which I plan to have available here for you all very soon. But this will give you an introduction to our serial, and Into the West, the Orphan Train is an award winner. It actually won 2 awards for historical fiction. So go ahead and give it a try. What have you got to lose? It's free. Now, keep in mind, I write these as Stephen Burckhardt. So if you go searching for Dianne Burckhardt, you're not going to find it. But don't worry, there is a link in the description of the podcast, as usual, so that you can easily find them. Now, if you don't like actually reading ebooks, how about an audiobook? We are also giving away the free downloadable audiobook version of Into the West, the Orphan Train, which we have available at burkhartbooks.com. Now, it is on a hidden page, so you have to find the link that I have posted in social media for this free book. But this one is a beta version. That's why we're giving it away for free, because this was my initial practice as I was trying to figure out how to do an audiobook, because we do want to turn all of the Into the West Saga serial books into audiobooks and have them for sale from our website. As soon as we get everything figured out, we will have all of the rest of the books available for you as well. But we just thought this would be a great thing to do to help celebrate our 75th episode. It is so exciting. I never even really thought about how long we would end up doing this. So I'm really looking forward to seeing where we go from here. And about that, the next thing that we're going to be bringing to you is the companion magazine, Book Banter Magazine. Because like today's episode, there was so much that Natasha Deen and I talked about that I could not fit into the time constraints for this episode. And it was such an interesting conversation. I don't want you to miss out on all that. So whenever we bring up the magazine, the rest of the interview will be in there. You're going to love it. Currently, we have everything in place. We think that we're going to be able to shoot for a fall release. And I'm so happy that I can announce now that our cover feature author is Mercedes Lackey. I am so thrilled to be able to bring this interview to you. You're going to love it. But for now, you know what time it is, folks. It's time for you all to go forth and be really happy about all the things that are coming up, and you get free stuff. Who's not going to be happy about that?